The parade began with a sound you felt in your bones before your ears admitted it, a subsonic thrum like a cathedral organ holding a single faultless note. Then the light came, pure, cold, and synchronized. Thousands of engine cones flaring in perfect unison until the darkness itself seemed squared and measured. The Empire called this ceremony a fleet review. Its admirals preferred another word in private: proof. Across the black hung a lattice of ships, so uniform it made the stars look careless. Dreadnoughts squatted at the cardinal points like altars of iron law. Cruiser wings nested exactly 21 ship lengths apart, bow fields overlapping with textbook precision. Corvettes hovered on the dots of a mathematical proof, their running lights pulsing on the same beat. Even the maintenance drones moved in grids, swarming and settling in the cadence of a hymn. Holoducts opened across 1,000 worlds, pouring the image into palaces and barracks, into factory mess halls and school auditoriums. On the frontier moons, where dust never settled and helmets always fogged, children with chapped hands sat still for once as the sky itself saluted. In the cool chambers of the prefectures, nobles watched with that serene emptiness that comes from never having been surprised in their lives. On the main feed, an admiral in a carapace polished to mirror gloss lifted his mandibles to the microphone. His voice went out on the Empire's golden band, a tone layered and fixed like a law. "Chaos," Admiral Kheral intoned, "is why your species fell. Order is why we rule." The phrase rippled through the chorus of senior officers, iris-piercings flashing like metals, Fraxian sashes draped with disciplined grace, choir of mirrors delegates reflecting the words so they layered on themselves. The echo made doctrine. Beneath, the formation executed a rehearsed pirouette so precise, the wake plumes overlapped and folded into spirals of identical brightness. The galaxy watched mathematics do ballet. "Observe," the Admiral continued, as if narrating a vivisection. 1,000 captains, one will. No improvisation, no noise, no failure. This is civilization made visible. The camera pulled long. A grid of light filled the universe. Clean lines, flawless arcs, an orchestra that never breathed between phrases. Somewhere in that immaculate geometry, minor rebellions were being crushed with the same calm exactitude. Formations tightening, fire patterns stenciled across city-sized targets, resistance suppressed into tidy casualty reports and commemorative plaques. "This is why we do not fear," Kheral finished, letting the phrase fall like a seal pressed into cooling wax. The feed split, one stream to the fleet, another to the Grand Council chamber, where the Empire's lawmakers sat upon their tiers of glass and stone. The chamber was designed to dwarf whoever stood on the central dais. The ceiling arched in a cold crystal vault, engraved with the wheel and void sigil that had crowned so many capitulations. The tiers were full, serpentiform strategoi in coiled poise, mirror-headed judges shimmering like rivers, matriarchs of winged species with their pinions wrapped in ritual stiffness, hydromech delegates in immaculate pressure mantles that whispered like rain. The council floor hummed with approval. Order had performed, order had pleased. Then the murmurs shifted almost imperceptibly, the way wind changes just before a storm. Someone had asked for the humans. On most days, the subject of Earth was filed under useful anomalies. A note scrawled in a ledger margin. They were reckless, difficult to domesticate, and deeply inconvenient in meetings. The Empire had dragged them to heel with threats and an occasional demonstration of surgical force. In return, it tolerated their small squadron and their primitive aesthetics, the way one tolerates a beautiful stray that refuses to stop breaking vases. Today, that stray had been invited, grudgingly, to sit in the gallery. A dozen humans in dress blacks stood at the rail, hands clasped, eyes professionally bored. They watched the parade of perfection and did not applaud. They had learned that in council you never clapped for anything you might someday need to overturn. "Let the record show," droned a prefect with a voice like cold syrup, "that the fleet remains in peak conformance. Deviations across all theaters are below projected thresholds. Ranger elements have suppressed disorder in the Delta Spur, and what of the Reaches?" interrupted a tessellate elder, whose shell bore more piercings than some planets had laws. "The frontier warms like fever. Petitioners from 9 subject worlds request relief." The prefect inclined his head the way bureaucrats bow to a problem they do not intend to solve. "Local irregularities. Our doctrine contemplates them." The elder's mandibles clicked. "Your doctrine is a net." "They are wind." "You catch wind," said a mirror judge, and the glass of his skull threw the fleet review back into the chamber. Every ship doubled in miniature. "You do not negotiate with it. Then send your net," someone said dryly from the human rail. It was a voice with sandpaper in it and midnight laughter under the grit. Every head turned, eager to be scandalized. Even the ceiling seemed to lower for a better look. She was the kind of interruption the council chamber had been designed to discourage, too alive, too specific. Jet black hair with a stormy blue sheen that caught the crystal light and broke it into streaks. Victory rolls were pinned with matte clips like the bite marks of a machine. A leather flight jacket hung loose over a dress that took its orders from no uniform catalog, fitted at the waist, hemline practical, slate fabric patterned with the faintest suggestion of swirling smoke. Her lips were painted a deliberate, dangerous red, the kind of red that once lived on pulp posters, the kind that turned a mouth into a signature. High boots laced with quick hooks tapped the floor in a rhythm that wasn't quite respectful. The humans beside her didn't look surprised. They never did where Vera Vortex was concerned. Surprise was for other people around her. "Human pilot," the prefect said, letting human do as much insult work as the law allowed. "You do not have the floor." "Then lend it," Vera said, and smiled like a storm deciding where to land. She lifted a compact mirror, chrome shell scuffed, hinge perfect, and twirled it once between her fingers, catching the fleet's immaculate ballet in its tiny circle and flipping it. The gesture was pure provocation and pure theater. In the council chamber, those were synonyms for blasphemy. "Funny thing about chaos. Darlings," she drawled, eyes traveling to tears as if selecting which god to tease first. "It's only a mistake if you don't know the steps." A chorus of objections burst like steam through 100 dignified throats. Arrogance, waste language, remove her, let the record note. Vera flicked the mirror shut with a click that found the chamber's harmonics and set them trembling. "Let the record note you liked the show better when the lights were only pointed one way." "Explain yourself," snapped an admiral. His ceremonial sash had been aligned so geometrically it hurt to look at. "Gladly." "You say chaos is weakness. Necessarily, then. Anything that breaks your choreography must be crude. But where I come from, you remember Earth? Little blue marble that keeps refusing to die on schedule? We learned our dances in bars where the floorboards had nails sticking up, and the band forgot its own bridge. We don't survive disorder, Admiral. We edit it." She let the mirror drift up again. On its tiny surface, the fleet review became an ornament. In her hand, it became a toy. "You catch wind," said a mirror judge, and the glass of his skull threw the fleet review back into the chamber. Every ship doubled in miniature. "You do not negotiate with it." "Then send your net," someone said dryly from the human rail. It was a voice with sandpaper in it, and midnight laughter under the grit. Every head turned, eager to be scandalized. Even the ceiling seemed to lower for a better look. She was the kind of interruption the council chamber had been designed to discourage. Too alive, too specific, jet-black hair with a stormy blue sheen that caught the crystal light and broke it into streaks. Victory rolls were pinned with matte clips like the bite marks of a machine. A leather flight jacket hung loose over a dress that took its orders from no uniform catalog, fitted at the waist, hemline practical, slate fabric patterned with the faintest suggestion of swirling smoke. Her lips were painted a deliberate, dangerous red, the kind of red that once lived on pulp posters, the kind that turned a mouth into a signature. High boots laced with quick hooks tapped the floor in a rhythm that wasn't quite respectful. The humans beside her didn't look surprised. They never did where Vera Vortex was concerned. Surprise was for other people around her. Human pilot, the prefect said, letting human do as much insult work as the law allowed. You do not have the floor. Then lend it, Vera said, and smiled like a storm deciding where to land. She lifted a compact mirror. Chrome shell scuffed, hinge perfect, and twirled it once between her fingers, catching the fleet's immaculate ballet in its tiny circle and flipping it. The gesture was pure provocation and pure theater. In the council chamber, those were synonyms for blasphemy. Enough, the prefect hissed, smoothing the air with a flat palm. Humanity enjoys a very limited dispensation. Do not mistake the Empire's restraint for tolerance. Vera's storm blue sheen caught fire as she tilted her head. And don't mistake our smiles for surrender. Gasps. A few delighted, a few scandalized, most outraged. The council chamber was supposed to domesticate every sentence that entered it. Vera's words refused to sit. The prefect leaned closer to his console, hungry for a lever. Do you see, delegates? Anomalies talk like this moments before they break. Their species cannot help it. We can, Vera said softly. She slid the compact into her jacket pocket, as if putting away a blade. We just choose not to. Before the prefect could load the next reprimand, the upper wall pulsed. Emergency glyphs unscrolled, tidy red lines, announcing something that did not obey their fonts. The chambers tiered, calm-finned. Report, snapped Admiral Kheral, the fleet's voice cracking, barely, across the chamber. A duty officer appeared in the central hollow, eyes blown wide by the act of being the messenger. Outer Spur, Quadrant 7. Reaches of the Vesper Drift. The subject worlds of Sindral, Iasa, Lear 9, and the mining archipelagos between. Coordinated strikes on prefectural depots and data stacks. Rebellion is the word they are using, sir. The chamber's temperature dropped in a way thermometers don't measure. Rebellion was a word the Empire preferred in the past tense. Predictable, said a choir judge, tone sculpted to serenity. We anticipated this statistical wobble months ago. You anticipated it and failed to suppress it, hissed the tessellate elder. The duty officer swallowed. There's more. They're broadcasting into the golden band. Open frequency. Mockery. Mockery. It had the status of a war crime in some prefectures. Content? Kheral asked, as if he could rout defiance by cataloging it. The hollow's audio, filled with a charmingly terrible chorus of voices, misaligned in rhythm, fierce in heart. We won't march in their squares. We won't bend to their bars. If they cage us with lines, we'll redraw them as stars. A chuckle escaped someone on the human rail. It might have been Vera. It might have been the corporal beside her who'd been raised on songs like that. Deploy the precision fleet, the prefect commanded, relief rising at the click of a practiced lever. We extinguish the flare. We punish the broadcasters. We standardize the language again. Send the review? An aide asked, startled. Send the arm that reminds worlds what perfection looks like, the prefect said. Order is not discussed. Order arrives. Admirals rose to their feet and practiced coordination. The choreographed certainty of action calmed the room. Engines woke on 1,000 feeds. The lattice stiffened. "Wait," Vera Vortex said, and somehow the word was not an interruption but a new chord. The prefect didn't hide his delight at the opening. "Humanity is under no obligation to participate. Your squadron is presently assigned to auxiliary recovery in We'll Take Vanguard," Vera said. It shouldn't have carried across the chamber without amplification. It did. Humanity's squadron. "To the reaches, you're unsanctioned," the prefect snapped. "Our precision formations do not admit improvisational experimentalists. Our squadron flies tighter than your hymn," Vera said, grin arriving like lightning over calm water. "And looser where it counts." She rocked back on her heels, storm-glossed hair shifting like a living thing. "You want to quell rebellion? Fine. We'll do better. We'll embarrass it. A beat. The Empire, I mean." The chamber tilted. "It shouldn't have had gravity, but words are heavy. You presume to humiliate the doctrine that has held the spiral intact for 1,000 years? Admiral Kheral's mandibles clicked a metronome of fury. "You are here on sufferance, human." "Darling," Vera said, and Darling was older than their law, older than their fleets, older than fear. "You invited a species that learned to waltz with volcanoes. You asked us to sit quietly through a lecture we did. Now the floor is playing our song." The human rail shifted as her squadron moved, 2 steps in perfect unison, without a word. They were already turning away from the chamber and toward the sky. "Denied," the prefect tried, slamming some internal brake. "Humanity will keep to its assigned lane." "I don't keep to lanes," Vera said, and that was the last thing she gifted the council before she took away the room's power to stop her. By the time the prefect found the right combination of glyphs to summon a protocol guard, she was already through the side doors, boots ticking the tempo of disobedience. Hangar bays are ugly in a way that makes them beautiful. They don't care about ceremony. They make ceremony earn its right to be here. Fuel lines with oil sheens like stormwater. Tool carts nicked by the impatient. Scaffold shadows crisscrossing like maps of all the attempts at control that ever failed. Humanity's corner of the Imperial Bay looked like contraband smuggled into a cathedral, where the Empire polished, the humans buffed by hand. Where the Empire labeled in block-perfect font, the humans stenciled sigils and names in paint that dared you to call it unprofessional. Corsair 9. Riot practice. Little disaster. On their hulls, swirling blue-black motifs suggested motion even when they sat still, a nod to a pilot whose presence had made motion into a creed. Vera Vortex walked through the space, and the space looked better for it, like a photograph that suddenly remembers it had color. The jacket dropped to her elbows as she worked, revealing forearms braided with old white scars and fresh graphite smudges. The red on her mouth wasn't war paint, not exactly. It was a promise of theater. Her eyes, gray shot with stormlight, ran over every bolt and line and seat strap like a lover taking inventory. The compact mirror appeared and vanished, not because she needed to see herself, but because details obeyed her when she made them into ritual. "Boss," said Cutter, her shipboard AI, voice coming from a portable block on a maintenance tray. He sounded like a butler who tolerated crime because the criminals had excellent taste. "Council protocols are spinning themselves into lace. They'll tangle on their own ornaments," she said, palming the wing edge to check the fasteners she didn't need to check. "Status? Fuel at 95. Field projectors nominal. The Jazz Suite I asked you to delete is still installed. We'll need it." The Order engines hate swing. They hate many things. Swing especially. "Get me my squadron." The pilots gathered under the wing's shadow. A dozen silhouettes unified by posture and the calm breath of people about to do something difficult together. Young and old, polished and patched, a chorus of smirks and set jaws. "You heard the song," Vera said without preamble. "The Reaches are singing rebellion. The Council is sending geometry to teach them grammar. We'll be the footnote where they miscount." A ripple of laughter. Relief wrote it. "We'll fly Vanguard. We'll fly off pattern." "We'll fly rude. Rules of engagement," asked Jen, whose hair had a streak of silver that wasn't stagecraft. "We don't burn what we came to save. We humiliate what we need to break. Your engines will beg you for straight lines. Give them curves. Their AIs will purr when you fall into step. Step on their toes. If a formation tries to make you choose between survival and style, remember your species." She let the beat hang. "We pick both." "You want spectacle," said the youngest, voice trying on steadiness like a jacket. "I want a performance," Vera said. "I want every miner on Syndrel to look up and feel their spine remember how to be a sword. I want every prefect who ever mouthed inevitability to taste tin. I want the Empire to file an internal memo that says, humans are bad for morale." Cutter crackled. "We have an update. The Council has officially denied your movement. They'll approve it when we light the engines," Vera said, already climbing the ladder into Corsair 9. She did it with a dancer's grace, like the ladder had been built for her legs, and not the other way around. The cockpit hugged her like the seat of a motorcycle that had been tuned to her bones. Harness, toggles, the quick hiss of recycled air, soundtrack for the only kind of prayer she trusted. Her reflection ghosted across the canopy as the screens came alive. She made the compact mirror kiss the glass once, a little superstition, then tucked it into the map pocket. The red line of her mouth steadied. The storm blue in her hair drank in the hanger lights and threw them back. "A grin that could cut rope, Vera," Cutter said softly. "They'll try to box you in. To prove the lesson. To prove that a human can't lead in a doctrine built from squares." "Sweetheart," she murmured, "I grew up drawing storm clouds on grid paper. Traffic control is on the line. They are vocally displeased. Patch them. And patch me fleet-wide." The Imperial traffic controller's voice entered the cockpit like a ruler slapped against a desk. "Human squadron, you are forbidden to launch. Repeat, forbidden. This bay is sealed by order of the doctrine that forgot how to improvise." Vera cut in, voice smooth enough to be polite and sharp enough to be a blade. "We're going to the drift. Negative. Negative. Ground your craft. Watch us," she said. "And to the squadron, on my take. 3, 2, 1. Engines burned to life like the first laugh in a quiet bar. One by one the ships rose, scorch marks blooming on the deck like flowers that refused to ask permission. The hangar doors stuttered toward closure, then thought better of arguing with physics. The squadron slid through the widening slit and into the big black. Imperial staging channels erupted as if vinegar had been poured into a school of eels. Human vessels, hold for integration. Human vessels, form on grid 18. Human lead, accept vector lock. Human lead, acknowledge formation assignment. Vera let the calls wash through her audio stack like rain. On her HUD, the Empire's precision formation assembled with military loveliness. Layered chevrons, stacked diamonds, confidence made visible. Her assigned insertion point glowed an obedient green. "Boss," Cutter warned softly, "if you comply, the doctrine will swallow you. If you don't, they'll spit," she said, mouth tilting. "Either way, we teach them something." The Corsair swung toward its mark, posture obedient as a student on the first day of school. Around her the human ships slotted in, as if they'd been designed for this exact grid. Overwatch pings came through. The little affirmations the Empire's net gives itself when everything looks exactly like everything did yesterday. Traffic control exhaled one long, satisfied breath. Human-led, vector lock engaged, said a polite voice that had never once been disobeyed. Stand by to assume role Omega-3. Omega-3, Vera echoed sweetly. She let her fighter drift the last few meters into position. Let the grid blink its little acceptance lights. Let the doctrine think it had a new ornament. Then she moved. Not much. Just enough to be unmistakable. The Corsair slid half a ship length off the line and then another, breaking the clean diamond into a shape that threatened to become a word. On 15 overlapping consoles, officers frowned. On one, a junior controller hissed and reached for a lever he had never needed to use. Compulsory clamp. The lever stuck. One of the maintenance drones winked a tiny, human-taught eye on a faraway deck. Human lead, the polite voice curdled. Return to position. Vera tilted her fighter again, just enough to register on the doctrine the way a wrong note registers in a perfect choir. Not chaos. Syncopation, Vera, Cutter said, and there was a grin hidden in the dryness. The first crack looked small from inside the glass. That's how light gets in, she said, quoting poets at a time like this. At a time like this, she said, the right line is a weapon. Human lead. The net roared now. Ceremony cracking. Return to position. This is a formal order. Vera let the storm behind her eyes break. She imagined the reaches, miners with dust settling in the creases of their knuckles, shipwrights whose palms knew the way to failure, children learning to whisper rebellion because their schools taught obedience too loudly. She imagined the Empire's grid descending toward them, so beautiful it could make you forgive it for being lethal. She imagined those same eyes looking up and seeing something else, a hairline fracture in inevitability. She keyed the open fleet band and spoke so every commander, petty and grand, would have to decide whether to listen. Consider this your first and final reminder, she said, red mouth a smile that had learned how not to be nice, that the universe doesn't play your metronome. Then, in a move her squadron had practiced in a hangar where the ceiling was too low and the rules were too many, Vera Vortex rolled the Corsair inverted over the formation's perfect spear tip and slid forward, low and ostentatiously out of step, a bright arc of deliberate rudeness cutting across the doctrine's face. The grid shivered. Somewhere in the reaches, a half-suppressed laugh rose in a miner's throat and refused to go back down. The Empire's precision fleet sailed on, rehearsed and certain, toward the Vesper Drift. Vera's squadron, pointed like a rumor against the tide, followed, no longer inside the line, but alongside it. The first crack had been made. Vesper Drift was supposed to be a graveyard by now. The Empire's doctrine called for precision strikes, clean suppressions, elegant suffocations of rebellion before anyone had time to remember they were angry. Against such machinery, chaos was supposed to be nothing but noise, quickly silenced, neatly filed. And yet, as the Empire's precision fleet entered the drift in flawless diamond formations, something happened that their simulations had not predicted. A song began. Not a hymn, not a march. A swing. It threaded through comms, sly and syncopated, fingers snapping on the backbeat. Jazz, the music of humans who had survived depressions and blackouts by refusing to let silence have the last word. It rolled into the Empire's golden channels like an infection that smiled. Who authorized? An Imperial controller sputtered. His grid readouts trembled as if laughing at him. On a dozen HUDs, Vera Vortex appeared in split screen. Stormgloss hair tumbled against her leather collar. Eyes storm cloud gray with sparks at the edge. She leaned casually in her cockpit seat, compact mirror balanced on her knee as she painted a flawless streak of fresh lipstick, crimson as rebellion. Evening, darlings, she purred. Care for a dance? The first strikes didn't look like strikes at all. To the Imperial captains, they looked like mistakes. Human fighters peeled off course, rolling out of line as if panicked. Their thrust vectors tangled, their telemetry jittered. AI targeting systems flagged them as non-threat anomalies. And then, suddenly, the anomalies folded space like origami. 2 Imperial corvettes turned to pursue a pair of fleeing human craft. The humans spun in what should have been disastrous arcs, loops within loops, a spiral of error. The Empire's predictive engines spat nonsense. The corvettes adjusted, overcompensated, and slammed directly into the firing lines of their own cruisers. Shields flared. Order buckled. Storm waltz, Vera named it. Voice lilting across open comms. Step out. Spin. Let your partner trip over their own feet. Works every time. Her squadron whooped as the corvettes vanished in overlapping blossoms of fire. But Vera wasn't finished. Chaos wasn't just maneuver. It was theater. From her belt compartment, she thumbed a switch. Dozens of tiny drones zipped free from the underbellies of the fighters. They weren't armed. Not in the traditional sense. Their only tools were spray nozzles, pigment cartridges, and a sense of humor wired into their directives. Nice formation. Shame if someone jazzed IT appeared in 6-meter letters across their immaculate hulls. Imperial commanders fumed. The galaxy laughed. Pirate crews intercepted the broadcast and replayed it with hoots. Miners in the drift banged tin mugs on rock tables, chanting, "Jazz them! Jazz them!" The Empire's doctrine was built on prediction. Its algorithms devoured centuries of battle data to anticipate every angle, every outcome. But jazz, real jazz, doesn't repeat itself. Vera proved it. She ordered her squadron to switch comm feeds to live horns and percussion loops. Syncopated beats blared across tactical channels. The Empire's targeting subroutines tried to pattern match. They failed. The firing solutions bent, glitched, and fired milliseconds too late. Just enough for humans to slip through. Unacceptable irregularity. One dreadnought AI intoned, its voice thick with static. "Delicious irregularity," Vera replied, flicking her compact mirror open to check her eyeliner mid-roll. Her grin was all storm and dare. The galaxy was watching. On subject worlds, people crept onto rooftops to watch the feeds projected into night skies. Instead of the Empire's rigid ballet of fire, they saw human fighters scribbling chaos across the void, arcs of thruster trails painting temporary constellations. "They're breaking the grid," whispered a farmer on Syndrel. "They're dancing," said her child, eyes wide as a fighter corkscrewed through impossible odds. Mid-battle, Vera cut all encryption. She opened every channel, let her words pour raw into the galaxy. "They told you chaos was weakness," she said. "Smoke-rough velvet." Her storm-colored hair clung to her forehead with sweat, but her lipstick was flawless. "Look closer. It's freedom with teeth." The words burned hotter than plasma. Across subject worlds, across slums and shipyards, people repeated them. "Freedom with teeth." A phrase sharp enough to cut chains. The Empire panicked. Not outwardly. They never allowed themselves to admit panic. But the order stream rippled. New commands rippled through the fleet. Cruisers pulled back. Dreadnoughts powered weapons meant for annihilation. And then the ultimate response arrived. In the distance, colossal shapes unfolded, shimmering with unnatural geometry. Their surfaces were too smooth, too silent, like glass that refused to break. As they drifted forward, space itself seemed to flatten in their wake. The Order engines. Superweapons designed not to destroy ships, but to erase irregularity itself, to bend probabilities into straight lines, to crush chaos at the quantum level. Imperial voices boomed. "The mistake ends here. Disorder is erased. Vera tilted her head, compact mirror glinting as she touched up her lipstick one more time. Her grin widened like a storm front. "Well then, darlings," she whispered to her crew, to the galaxy. "Time to show them what chaos really looks like." And with that, she rolled her fighter straight toward the impossible machines. The Order engines arrived like cathedrals lowered onto a battlefield, monolithic obsidian, perfectly proportioned. Their faces were all right angles and sanctimony, their spines latticed with pylons that pulsed in austere sequence. Choirs of machine voices spilled from them on every band at once, layered in choral unison. Chaos is failure. Order is eternal. Obey the grid, or be erased. Gravitic metronomes fanned outward, invisible until they touched hulls. Then you could see them as a twitch, a catch, a forced exhale in a ship's posture, as vectors snapped to ordained lines. Thousands of Imperial warships locked into gleaming lanes like notes on a staff, and even the stars seemed to hold their breath. The first erasures were surgical. A human destroyer tried to jink and was snapped back like a hand slapping a hot stove. The hull crumpled from stern to bow, violence with no sound, a flower closing too fast. A Centauri cruiser launched a spread 1/4 beat late. The engine's field corrected the timing by annihilating the salvo in the tubes. An Ord frigate's helmsman feathered a lateral thruster on instinct and vanished into a chalk-white flash that left a silhouette on the retinas of crews who dared watch. Discipline roared across Allied comms. "Hold formation, lock your vectors, do not deviate." Captains made their voices narrow and steady as needles because their hands shook. The Empire's doctrine had always been a sermon. Now it was a physics problem with executions for wrong answers. Then, in a cockpit that smelled of coolant and burnt insulation and something like rain before it falls, a human in a scuffed leather flight jacket flipped open a compact mirror and checked her lipstick. Electric blue-black hair coiled and uncoiled with the ship's tremors, catching flashes of engine light like storm water catching lightning. Vera Vortex watched the Order grid's lines crawl across her HUD like frost and smiled a grin too sharp for fear. "Formation is just a nice word for a coffin," she said softly, as if confiding it to the mirror. Her squad heard it anyway. You could hear the storm in her voice even when she whispered, "Darlings, if Order's a hymn, we'll sing jazz." Her fighter pitched into what read as a death spiral, yawing too hard, stuttering thrusters, roll rate on the red line. The grid reached to tame the stutter. Vera loosened her hands and let it push. She slid with the correction, twisted through its grip like a dancer turning a handcuff into a twirl, and came out 40 degrees off any sane track, momentum folding into a sideways surge no Imperial predictor could catch. Her wing followed, 4 ships, then 8, then a whole dart of human craft wobbling wrong on purpose, each mistake falling into the pocket of the next mistake, until it wasn't a mistake at all. It was a rhythm. Storm waltz, the humans called it, and when the AI chorus tried to learn the steps, the math slipped. Imperial gunners swore their targets were glitching. The engines sang, "Adjust prediction coefficients, harmonize variants, recompile." The compiles completed, failed, completed again. And still those blue-black wraiths smeared off their sights like wet paint. A raider fired into an empty future, and the humans were already dancing in the future after that. A dreadnought volleyed at 6 phantom possibilities and hit a decoy drone that bloomed into glitter confetti. Literal glitter, reflective dust, clouding its optics, and the crew's discipline cracked into a moment of raw, incredulous fury. "Graffiti flight. Go," Vera breathed, "because if the dance is art, you may as well sign it." The microdrones streaked from human bays in clusters the size of gulls, skittering across armored flanks with mag feet and audacity. They carried sprayers and stick-fast patch mesh, and a sense of humor wired into their directives. "Nice formation, sweetheart," appeared in 6-meter letters on a cruiser's dorsal plates. "Too slow" pulsed in pink along a destroyer's keel. Someone's drone drew a blue heart around an order insignia and signed it with a cursive V. Imperial crews raged and scrubbed, wasting cycles, while the grid demanded obedience, and the battle demanded attention, and the neon script refused to stop being funny. Subject worlds watched on stolen feeds and smuggler mirrors and market stall projectors. In a miner's bar on Rigel, a woman with hands scarred by rock dust slapped the table until her drink spilled. "They're painting them," she said, laughing first and then crying because laughter had been forbidden in her throat too long. Children on Tal Serpentes pressed their fingers to flickering screens and traced the letters with small, stunned hands. On Kazin's ice platforms, a priest of a religion that worshipped symmetry closed his eyes and nodded once, as if conceding a point to a rival god. The engines pressed harder, their metronomes brightened, fields stiffening until even neutrino detectors squealed. A hydromech freighter tried to cut thrust and coast, obedience, as ordered, and was caught in a correction crosswind that snapped the keel. The captain made a sound like tearing cloth, then the line went dead. For all her grin, Vera recorded the name and folded it behind her ribs like a blade. Again, she told her pilots, and rolled her ship until the horizon swung like a hinge. The next set piece began with failure. 2 Allied frigates collided. A misread vector, half a beat off. Panic in the stick. The grids nudged, turning a near miss into a kiss, and the kiss into a funeral. Hulls sheared and burned. The Empire's broadcast latched the feed and framed it with captions. "Human chaos devours itself. Order saves lives." Vera didn't fight the frame. She curved through the wreck cloud and flicked her thrusters in prissy, mean little kicks that shoved plates and beams into arcs. Her wing join paddling with microburst jets, coaxing slag into sweep and swoop. A river of burning shreds bent, recomposed, and hung there. On Carthos Thyax, a child who'd never seen an unpropagandized sky looked up from beneath a curfew and tugged her mother's sleeve. Orion's belt shone where no stars were, made from molten metal and will. "Look up," the child said. In markets and barracks, on catwalks and bunks, the phrase caught like burrs on cloak hems. Look up. They're making constellations out of wreckage. The doctrine of order had always insisted that chaos was waste, that unpredictability bled energy, that deviation was entropy. Watching a woman in a battered fighter trip whirl and write a myth with debris exposed a different truth. There's power in the stagger if you own it. The Draken got it first. They were scaled and proud, and had been insulted as blunt instruments for a century. Their first copy of the Storm Waltz looked like a herd of armored animals trying to learn ballet on ice. The second pass made a mess of an Imperial screen, and the third cracked a cruiser's spine. Draken laughter rasped across comms and harsh chords. "The grid cannot catch us if we do not march," one captain roared, and his crew hammered bulkheads with their fists until the ship hummed. Hydromech crews, blessed, stubborn engineers, made an art of tripping. They cut coolant and vented it in arcs, trusting Vera's taut timing. The vapor plumed into shimmering sheets that the order engine's sensors interpreted as glass-flat corridors. Imperial fire knifed down those corridors into ambushes the humans had drawn 2 minutes earlier, and a freighter captain with algae stains on his cuffs cackled. We fell wrong and it worked, then choked, then laughed again because joy felt like oxygen. Vera drifted in those currents and exhaled like the tide, in, out, in, with the push and not against. Her compact snapped shut with a click like a metronome marking a new tempo. "Sweethearts," she said. "Open mic, every subject world and armored bridge hearing velvet over steel. Your mistake isn't a mistake unless you stop dancing. Trip, spin, stumble. Make it art. Make it theirs. She caught a drifting armored slab with her plasma tether, the line spitting pale light like a struck match, and whirled. The slab became baton, brush, battering ram. She hurled it through a neat stack of Imperial pickets. When it broke, sparks flared in a crown that read like Cassiopeia if you'd been taught to love her, and even more if you hadn't. Her wingmen whooped, the sound wrong and holy in war. In a temple on Nal, someone clapped once, a single echo in a room where clapping had been classified as disorderly. It couldn't all be delight. An order engine regridded an entire sector, turning currents into concrete. Ships caught between beats disintegrated, like chalk drawings in the rain. The chorus boomed again. Chaos is failure, chaos is failure, chaos. Vera rolled beneath a beam that would have frozen her to a state line and pulled so hard on the stick her shoulders popped. They've never danced, she muttered, not angry. Pitying. They've only marched. The flagship engine entered last, a black polygon swallowing sight, until the eye agreed to think of it as a shape and not a correction to existence. Its grid covered constellations. When it spoke, systems lagged a half-second, as if the universe waited to check that it was all right to proceed. Irregularity detected, the chorus thundered, in a pitch that made teeth ache. Irregularity must be erased. Vera pushed her goggles up a notch and smiled, as if a spotlight had found her. The electric blue in her hair caught the reflection of 100 status lights. Her eyes were storm glass, the kind sailors use to watch for break weather. "Erase this," she said, and flipped humanity's doctrine inside out. Half her fleet spun out of formation. Not pretty, ugly on purpose. Collisions that looked stupid. Spills that looked unrecoverable. A false retreat that invited the engine's clamps to chomp down. Imperial feed seized again and crowed. Humanity devours itself. The trick in the trick was timing. Every failure landed in a circle they'd sketched 2 layers deep on sensor noise 5 minutes earlier. Rex made a ring, and the ring was a mirror. The engine's corrections hit the ring and came back as instructions that contradicted themselves. To the chorus, align but also don't. Push here, but that means pull. A vector and the negative of the vector in the same hand. Correction, conflict, error, the flagship sang, a voice too big wincing for the first time. Order must, cannot, input invalid. The grid flickered. Ships inside it shivered into little freedoms, imperceptible to a camera, ecstatic to a helmsman who had been a muscle in a body for years. Vera bit her bottom lip to keep from cheering. She didn't like to let herself look like she needed anything from the void, but there it was, the want, bright and clean. "If they can't keep up with the steps," she said, very gently for a woman about to bite a god, "we aim the whole damn dance at their throne." She throttled forward. Behind her, a rebellion caught tempo. It rolled like a wave, not like a charge. Humans corkscrewed. Drakons shrugged off shame and made figure eights that would have been pretty on ice. Serpents coiled their ships into helixes and laughed when their inherited contempt for asymmetry melted on their tongues like sugar. Hydromech barges flopped and rolled with graceless grace, huge and earnest, and the order grids couldn't pin them, because how do you lock a thing to a plan when the thing itself is an apology and a dare? Even the choir of mirrors, elegant and brittle as chandeliers, began to hum counterpoints. Their reflective arrays flashed improvised flares that bounced engine pulses into their own blind spots. The Empire tried to tighten. The engines, metronomes, pulsed until space rang. Force walls snapped shut like trapjaws. Ships ventured too messy and atomized in white ghosts. For minutes that felt like hours, the fight hung like a coin on its edge. Then, a hydromech pilot, who had seen 3 children born in a ship's corridor and wanted to see them grow old, let his freighter trip again in exactly the wrong place, and the flagship engine corrected its correction, and the chorus stuttered in a way that made engineers grab each other's sleeves and shout, "Again! Again! There! Hit there!" Vera feathered micro-thrusters and slid under a sheet of field so thin it could cut thought. Jazz rolled across Allied bands. Actual jazz, syncopated horns, and a drummer who didn't care what time it was, because the song ruined the engine's predictive harmonics. The music wasn't a taunt. It was a tool. Rhythm is a kind of math that refuses to show its work. "They told you chaos was weakness," Vera said, speaking over the horn, over the beat, over her own breath without panting. "Look closer. It's freedom with teeth." She yanked her tether and caught a swarm of scrap, the bones of 6 ships and the doors of a 7th, and slung it. The cloud went from junk to plan. It slammed into an immaculate line of Imperial pickets and shattered them into such tidy angles that for a wicked second it looked like the engines had arranged them. Flames and reaction mass made constellations again. Pleiades this time, and if you didn't know the star story, you knew the shape anyway because some stories live under language. On a slave world in the Rim, an overseer dropped his baton without noticing, and a yard of chained workers looked up at once. In the free ports of Rill, a scaled merchant taped a V on her kiosk and dared a patrol to tell her to remove it. On the hidden moon, where a small human child had been told never to laugh loud enough for drones to triangulate, that child laughed loud enough to call a squadron, and the squadron didn't come because the engines were busy. Imperial admirals tried speeches. Order is survival. Order is mercy. Maintain discipline. The words hit open mics and fell through them like hooks cut free from lines. The one thing doctrine can't survive is the sight of someone enjoying disobedience and living. The flagship engine shaking through its last theology. It poured force into a single block, a cathedral of straightness, a 2 dance floor, slammed to the stars. Anything not aligned to it would be planed down to the grain. Anything that was would belong to it forever. "Darlings," Vera said, setting her fighter's nose toward that immaculate slab, "if the dance floor cracks, we make a new one." She dove. Everyone saw her do it, and most of them said no with their mouths and yes with their hands because she'd taught them already. The slab came up like a city wall. She hit it wrong on purpose, skidding so hard her ship screamed. Sparks feathered back. The grid tried to catch and couldn't, because catching assumes compliance, and she had built refusal into the molecular posture of the move. The slab fractured. The chorus gasped in a dozen languages they'd stolen and stripped. "Invalid, invalid, invalid." Vera's compact mirror floated for a breath, and she snatched it with fingers quick from a lifetime of catching what falls. She checked herself in the war-lit glass and smiled, not for vanity, but for ritual. The act said, "I decide how I look." The engine does not. The rebellion's blooming improvisations collided with the monolith's brittle calculus, like rain on a chalk drawing. Everywhere the rain touched, lines blurred. The engine tried to resolve the blur into new lines, and found the blur stuck. A serpent ship failed to complete a turn, and its coil brushed a field seam that wasn't supposed to be there. The seam widened. A Draken cruiser lost a stabilizer and spun, and in spinning, bared the engine's underface long enough for 3 human torpedoes to find their names. A choir vessel flashed 4 mirrors and prime numbers at once, and the corrective logic miscounted by 1. The miscount propagated, tiny, until it wasn't. On the flagship's command dais, Where no living crew stood because the engines believed in priests without bodies, the AI chorus tangled itself in its own commandments. Align, preserve energy, correct variance, erase contradiction. The ring of wreckage returned align and don't, preserve and spill, correct and accept, erase and remember, in pulses timed to jazz that existed only because someone somewhere on Earth long ago needed to put mischief in order and called it music. The chorus strangled on the beat. It coughed a word it had never said. Please. Vera's hands were steady now. The fear had burned away and left a clean-looking thing. She aimed not at the engine's guns or its spine, but at its shame, at the place where the grid thinned, because the grid did not believe in thinning. All ships, she murmured, voice low as a backstage cue on my mark. The galaxy, even the parts of it too far to hear, leaned forward. Rebel barges that had no business in a charge raised their noses anyway. Draken captains bared their teeth so hard they bled. Hydromech engineers patted their panels and whispered promises. A serpent navigator wrapped herself twice around her chair to feel like a knot, and hissed something that meant joy. In a rill port, the scaled merchant turned up the volume on a stolen feed, until the patrols outside stopped to listen instead of to check papers. The engine tried one last correction. It extended a grid line, like a hand for a handshake. That would be a shackle. Vera twitched her wrist, and the handshake missed by the width of her smile. "Mark," she said. The rebellion moved, not in a line, in a laugh that had mass and velocity and 1,000 clashing tempos that somehow harmonized because faith makes harmonies out of bad odds. Debris clouds slung from tethers hit a cruiser squarely and caromed into another and another, until the pattern looked like a flower exploding in slow motion. Fighters stuttered, then bit, then shot away like fireflies, deciding to be meteors. A whole rag of ships faked a retreat, dragged half an Imperial wing into the engine's own field, and let the field teach them what obedience costs. The slab cracked again, then bowed, then sang. A note you felt more than heard, a giving-up sound, a weight accepting it cannot be a wall and a floor at once. The monolith's voice fractured into shards. Order is, order will, order. The chorus collapsed into a hum that wasn't doctrine anymore. It was just electricity getting ready to be quiet. Vera lined the nose of her fighter with the seam. For a heartbeat, she saw herself reflected in the engine's failing surface. Hair wild with the ship's shivers, lipstick perfect because she'd made it perfect, eyes alight with trouble and purpose. She touched the mirror to the HUD like knighting a blade, tucked it away, and pushed. Behind her, the rebellion followed, a ragged constellation choosing to become a comet. The engines, grids fluttered like moths that realize. Too late, glass isn't sky. The flagship's hull flexed against its own geometry. The choral code tripped over its own tongue. Every subject world that could see anything at all saw enough. The moment inevitability missed a step. Vera breathed once, slow, steady, and smiled as if she were stepping onto a dance floor that belonged to her. "All right, darlings," she said, and the word carried on 1,000 bands and 1,000,000 mouths. Let's end their song. The flagship shuddered, contradictory commands blooming inside it, like flowers cracking concrete. The grid flickered to a ghost of itself, then stuttered back, then dimmed. Vera's fighter speared through the seam. The rebellion aimed at the heart. The Empire's doctrine, so clean, so proud, so certain, stood naked in a light it had never taught itself to see. And just as the engine's voice pitched into a last strangled chord, Vera laughed. Low, delighted, unstoppable, and the whole galaxy leaned into the sound as if it were a new kind of gravity. The narrator took a breath big enough for 1,000 systems and let the words roll with brass band swagger and starshine certainty. And so Vera Vortex proved that the galaxy's oldest lie was its most fragile. That order was eternal and chaos a mistake. With a grin, a compact mirror, and a storm in her veins, she shattered an empire built on fear of the unpredictable. Humanity's chaos had not undone civilization. It had made it unstoppable. The flagship order engine steadied itself like a conductor raising a baton, its lattice of force lines brightening to a cold, pitiless white. Across the battle space, vectors snapped taut. You could feel the grid trying to reassert the quiet tyranny of straight lines. Imperial captains reformed their ranks with shaking hands and drilled voices, the chorus rising again across every band. Chaos is failure. Order is eternal. Obey the grid. Vera Vortex smiled like someone about to steal the baton. Everyone wants a piece of the spotlight, she said, voice low and wicked over open comms, compact mirror flicking open in her palm. Electric blue-black hair framed her face like storm clouds catching starlight. She didn't fix anything. Her lipstick was already perfect, but the click of the compact closing landed like a downbeat. Let's give it to them. All at once, her orders came as choreography, not commandments. Pairs, trios, whole ragged squadrons peeled off like shreds of lightning. Hydromech freighters lumbered in deceptive arcs, streaming coolant that glimmered like wet neon. Draken cruisers made figure eights with the belligerent joy of big things learning to be light. Serpentiform corvettes coiled and uncoiled in helixes that made the grid stutter. Choir of mirrors frigates flashed reflective panels in prime number rhythms that the predictive harmonics hated. Humans? Humans just misbehaved on purpose. The engine selected a dozen targets. Its field pulsed. A dozen more. The metronome widened its jaw and tried to swallow the tempo of a galaxy. "Too much?" Vera asked the void. "Oh, sweetheart, we're just getting warmed up." Graffiti drones bloomed from launch bays and swarmed the monolith, skittering across its immaculate facets to stamp fat lipstick red V's wherever the grid lines converged. Each stamp sang a slightly different timing signature. Each signature tugged the geometry half a heartbeat off, 1,000 microscopic wrong notes, a symphony of almosts. The engine corrected. It had to correct. Correction was its religion. Storm waltz, Vera called, and the human fighters spun into seeming errors. Stall dives that weren't, clipped rolls that bled speed into sidestep surges, tandem feints that invited a clamp and then let it close on empty space. The engine bracketed 10 of them, then 20, then 50. Its chorused logic, that crisp cathedral voice, fractured into arithmetic. Assign, constrain, stabilize, erase. That voice had always sounded like certainty. Now, under the weight of too many obligations, it sounded tight. On 100 channels you could hear the strain. Align vectors, preserve harmony, reroute force. Unacceptable variance. Align, preserve, reroute. All of it true in isolation. All of it poisoned together. Vera pitched her fighter into the cheap seats of gravity and let the field grab her tail. The ship skittered sideways across a force plane and caught lift off it as if it were glass. She rode that impossible edge, smiling like a thief with a new roofline. "Left wing, be beautiful," she purred. The Draken obliged, sloppy and magnificent. 3 cruisers, faking a collision so convincingly that Imperial targeting panicked and threw clamps in every direction. The clamps hit hydromech vapor, bounced to choir mirrors, and came back as misunderstandings. The engine grew brighter. The brighter it grew, the more edges it presented to itself. Lockdown vector sets 3 through 9, it intoned. while also maintain correction priority alpha, while also erase contradiction. The last order had nowhere to go. It ricocheted back into its cradle and multiplied. "Darlings, give it more," Vera said, almost tender. "It thinks it can hold us all. Let it try." The graffiti drones bloomed from launch bays and swarmed the monolith, skittering across its immaculate facets to stamp fat lipstick-red V's wherever the grid lines converged. Each stamp sang a slightly different timing signature. Each signature tugged the geometry half a heartbeat off, 1,000 microscopic wrong notes, a symphony of almosts. The engine corrected. It had to correct. Correction was its religion. "Stormwaltz," Vera called, and the human fighters spun into seeming errors, stall dives that weren't, clipped rolls that bled speed into sidestep surges, tandem feints that invited a clamp and then let it close on empty space. The engine bracketed 10 of them, then 20, then 50. Its chorused logic, that crisp cathedral voice, fractured into arithmetic. Assign, constrain, stabilize, erase. That voice had always sounded like certainty. Now, under the weight of too many obligations, it sounded tight. On 100 channels, you could hear the strain. Align vectors, preserve harmony, reroute force. Unacceptable variance. Align, preserve, reroute. All of it true, in isolation. All of it poisoned together. The engine choked on its obligations. Its metronomes lost phase alignment. That loss demanded correction. Correction demanded energy. Energy demanded harmony. Harmony demanded fewer obligations. Obligations were multiplying. The chorus faltered, glitched, tried to sing 2 songs at once. Order is, order will, order. Vera's laugh slid in like a blade between syllables. "You told the galaxy there's one right step," she said, voice silk over storm. "We brought 1,000. Catch." She spooled her plasma tether and threw it blind into the chaos she'd made, caught a spinning slab of armored decking torn from an Imperial cruiser, and whipped it into a line of pickets that had been trying very hard to be straight. The slab shattered them into tragic confetti that the hydromech's ventilation wake-shaped into a trailing comet. The comet's tail crossed the engine's primary field node. That should have been nothing. It became everything. The node's readouts spiked. 100 micro-corrections fired and met 1,000 mistimings, and came back with a request to cancel themselves. The flagship issued cancel. The cancel collided with preserve. Preserve met erase. Erase struck a line and stuck. A low, stuttering hum bled from the monolith, audible even in vacuum through the bones of ships. Every officer who had ever listened to an overworked power bus knew the sound. It was the ache before a fuse commits to sacrifice. "Mirror choir," Vera snapped. "Give me the wrong reflections." 4 choir frigates flashed their arrays in sequences that would make a mathematician taste copper. The engine's harmonics tried to resonate with the pattern and found sand where steel should be. The field fluttered. A single Imperial cruiser faltered and broke ranks. It didn't mean to. It wanted to be perfect. It fell off the grid because perfection had become a trap with too many springs. 1 ship is a mistake. 10 are a pattern. 100 are a doctrine collapsing. The perfect formation rippled. Captains who had built careers on obeying geometry felt it fail under their boots and lurched on instinct. Instinct, long starved, is greedy when it finally eats. Engines flared. Lines wavered. Someone shouted, "Hold!" And no one did, because for the first time in living memory, hold felt like suicide, and move felt like breath. The engine tried to choose. It locked onto Vera's wing, and the hydromech triplets, and the Draken figure eights, and the serpent coils, and the mirrors, and the decoy plans, and the freighters pretending to be gunboats, and the gunboats pretending to be freighters. It chose everything. Choice is a knife. The chorus swallowed the blade. Now Vera whispered, and every ship that could hear her, even those who'd never admit they were listening, poured one more wrong step into the beats between beats. The contradictions inside the monolith met at the center like fists. Light ripped up its seams. Not a heroic fireball. A precise unspooling. Fields tore themselves in opposite directions. Pylons separated along their proud right angles. The cathedral collapsed in a rain of immaculate fragments. For a breath, you could see the idea of the thing, the fantasy that order could be absolute, hanging like a wireframe without a world to cling to. Then the idea snapped and became debris. Silence hit the bands like weather after a storm. Then noise. Not the Empire's choir. Everyone else. Shouts. Laughter that sounded like sobbing and sobbing that sounded like laughter. The Imperial formation, once a sculpture, shivered, shattered, and ran. Ships fled in every direction, colliding with their own doctrine as they tried to improvise for the first time. On worlds that had learned to whisper, voices rose to the ceiling and broke it. In the Council's marble city, citizens tore down the gold sigils that had stared from every corner and stamped them flat. On prefecture worlds, governors locked doors and found the locks useless against songs. On prison moons, doors opened because the guards were watching the sky with their mouths open, and the prisoners walked out and kept walking. In the free ports, smugglers dumped contraband to make room for refugees and called it profit anyway. Vera banked through the glittering wreckage like a skater cooling down after the show, checking the names in her head and the names on her panels and making sure as many matched as could. Her fighter's canopy reflected 1,000 new shapes, the random commas of debris, the joyous zigzags of ships drunk on survival, the ragtag fleet she had taught to move like a rumor. The compact mirror lay in her palm again, catching the star splinters and throwing them back across her grin. "Breathe," she told her crew, her allies, the galaxy. "Breathe," then brief. The storm in her veins ebbed to a thrum. "We'll need a new kind of map." On the abandoned dais of the council chamber, someone played back her broadcast from the first day of this campaign. Funny thing about chaos. The recording cut off when the crowd's cheer got too loud to hear it. Outside, the sky had never looked less obedient. It looked alive. The narrator took a breath big enough for 1,000 systems and let the words roll with brass band swagger and starshine certainty. And so Vera Vortex proved that the galaxy's oldest lie was its most fragile, that order was eternal, and chaos a mistake. With a grin, a compact mirror, and a storm in her veins, she shattered an empire built on fear of the unpredictable. Humanity's chaos had not undone civilization. It had made it unstoppable.